It is always a delight to come to a place like Hyderabad, which is so evolved, so developed, so forward-looking. We were here, in fact, when we started Indian Army's outreach program to reach out to the industry, to reach out to the academia. One of the first destinations that we had chosen was Hyderabad. And that was because Hyderabad, like you just heard what the Vice Chairman said, what Mr. Datla said, has, in fact, a very, very advanced, shall we say, defense ecosystem. And without meaning to offend anyone, I think having advanced in a particular way, having evolved in a particular manner, probably it has some legacy issues also, which needs to be resolved in its path to go ahead. And I'll touch upon that as we progress. That said, I think the larger point which I'm trying to make is when you come to a place like Hyderabad, and of course, when you go through a Q&A session in a place like Hyderabad, it is so much more matured, it is so much more advanced. In fact, it makes us feel, shall we say, more intellectually and policy challenged to take on such questions when we come to an evolved and matured gathering like this. I'm conscious of the fact that this afternoon you have a session which is on indigenous technology for defense, in which the whole mission is to how to move from an import nation to an export nation. I think that is what the mandate for that session is. So what I will try to do is, in this part that has been assigned to me, for which I'm so thankful, I will try and build a kind of base for the afternoon session, and also with its associated effects that it may have in the other sessions that you have over the next 2 days. So what I'll do is I'll try and touch upon the defense, predominantly Army, from the perspective of requirements, from the perspective of policy, and from the perspective of finance. If you look at the requirement perspective, I think the important thing to understand for us, more than the industry, important thing to understand for us, which we have understood, which we have realized, that our battlefield circumstances are very, very typically Indian. You see, nowhere else, I think, you have adversaries deployed 24/7, 365 in what we call an eyeball-to-eyeball contact configuration. Forces clash on the battlefield, they maneuver, they regenerate, they fight, and there is a particular cycle, of conflict, war, resolution, peace, and so on. In our context, the circumstances being what they are, that typical cycle does not apply. It's a constant conflict we can see. It's a constant conflict which is interlaced with proxy war. And if you go on to the other front, it has its own, range of challenges. So if these are typical Indian battlefield circumstances, we are managing with a certain amount of import, and I'll touch upon that in a short while. But that can meet the requirements only to the extent that the adaptation permits. As forces, as a service, we are convinced that ultimately we will have to find Indian solutions to fight India's wars. And with the way the technological capabilities have grown in the country, we see no reason why this is not possible. If you look at our requirements, particularly the Army, our requirements are huge. If the requirements are huge, there is no reason why it can't be a sustained business model. If you look at the number of schemes, for example, the number of procurement schemes, what we call them, at any given time, we run about 120 to 130 procurement schemes at different stages, from the process of, from the stage of the RFI, request for information, to what we call the competent financial authority approval. At any given time, approximately 120 plus minus schemes are running. Of this, around 40 to 45% schemes are valued below 150 crores. The point which I'm emphasizing through this little statistics is it is well within the reach of the MSME. It is highly, conducive for wide participation. And the third thing is, although, we keep emphasizing the point that it's very technology intensive, what I would submit is, particularly for the Army, comparatively, the technological requirements are much more achievable. If you look at the category of our requirements, the first category, of course, is what appears to be technologically intensive, cost intensive, that is, let's say, the combat vehicles, helicopters, air defense systems, and so on. But at the end of the day, each one of them is actually a combination or an integration of several subsystems and components. And for those of you who are working with the defense industry here, which has been so almost since independence, when we started with the ordnance factories, eventually the DRDO came into being, and then finally came the spread of the DPSUs, and since 2001, the private industries have also come in. So if you see, ultimately, it is a question of getting into it. Ultimately, it's a question of, shall we say, investing a little in the capability to integrate, and also a certain amount of emphasis on materials. Some time back, we just heard that, technology cannot be equated only to IT and QED after that. The spread of technology has to be across, starting from the material till the integration. And I think with the way the emphasis is slowly shifting, and perhaps some policies outside, which may be on the face of it critical, may be actually helping us in the long run to be able to build those capabilities here.